Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Ward. And the word of the day is war, actually, which is hard to say. The Daily Ward, the word of the day is war. Try it. Anyway, war as in trade war, what's happening in the economy. I talked about this yesterday, the growing concerns of a recession. Now I think the recession is being the at least talk of a recession happening is fabricated primarily by the media. So we're going to look at some numbers today. We're going to reiterate what it means to be into a recessionary period in the United States, how it's measured, and primarily it's measured by GDP. But GDP is just a calculation. So what goes into GDP is what's important. There's 5 things that go into GDP: personal consumption, expenditures. That's how much people are willing to pay for goods. And those prices are tracked. And that price tracking creates either inflation or deflation. So it's an important component. It's the first component to GDP, consumption. Second component is investment, specifically business investment. There are a lot of things that go into that. How much businesses are reinvesting in their own firms, how much they're investing in other firms overseas, which takes away from net investment, but that's a whole topic of another discussion. I know that's the second component of GDP. Third component, government spending. Trust me, the government has no problem spending money. It's the biggest business in the world, and you're a part of it. And it's up for grabs every 4 years. Imagine that. The biggest business in the world, the United States government, is up for grabs every 4 to 8 years. Think about that. Think about what goes into, having a campaign to run the biggest business in the world. You don't see Apple changing its whole executive suite every 4 years or every 8 years. So anyway, side note, but government spending, that's the third component. And the fourth component, which is actually 2, is trade balance. And that's exports minus imports. And this is where things are getting interesting, to say the least, because we have trade deal, the Pacific trade deal that was enacted, that wasn't necessarily good for the United States, but it was good for the global economy. It allowed free trade into the United States for a lot of countries that otherwise wouldn't necessarily have access, and foreign investment dollars plowed back into cheaper access to goods across the globe. So the important thing to know here is that that trade deal was squandered by the Trump administration, and they're trying to put together another trade deal specifically with China, which is really our number one trade partner and has been for quite a very long time, to have it be a win-win situation. Now, China has the manufacturing power, the production power. The U.S. has buying power. So we have our dollar. It's actually the reserve currency of the world. And it's important to know that our buying power has a lot to do with how China operates its economy. It's based solely on, not solely, but probably a good 85-90%, don't actually know the real number, on production of goods sold to the United States. So basically, our dollars that are made here in the United States through the banking system, through paying off of credit, the banks lend on a fractional lending system. You pay your house mortgage, you pay an interest rate, money is created in the system. That's one way money is created. There's multiple other ways, but that's just for simplicity. That money that's created into the system trickles through to a consumer. That consumer buys something, probably at Walmart or Amazon, which is basically China, and those dollars go to China, right? And China becomes wealthy because they sell goods to the United States. The United States buys all the goods for a cheaper rate than it could get it in the United States, even though it's shipping across the world. So, to spare you an economics lesson totally today, because I know economics is super boring, but it's something that I know quite a bit about, and I see what's happening right now with the tariff situation and the trade balance, and also the media trying to fabricate a recession. Now, this is important because in 1992, the media did the same thing, and the incumbent, which was Herbert Walker Bush, lost that election based on a fabrication of recession. So if you start hearing the media talk about a lot about recession coming up, and then there's this stat that came out of the National Bureau of Economic Research the other day that says 74% of economists believe that there's a recession that could happen in the next 2 years. Well, could be true. I mean, are economists predicting future now? So we had economists in 2008, 2007, 2009. They didn't predict that one. So, and I don't think that they can necessarily predict anything just based on a arbitrary factor like a yield curve inverting. Basically, bonds are cheap right now, and this is a full topic for Sunday's discussion. So, again, this is the Daily Ward, just to sell the show a little bit. It comes on. This is my daily monologue. And then Sunday, this is what I set up. This show is what I set up, the Sunday morning live talk show. So when I say this is a topic for Sunday's show, because I don't want to dig into the weeds really far every day here. This is just me highlighting important pieces of information and front-loading Sunday's show. So we're going to do this every week, Monday through Thursday, the Daily Ward, Sunday morning talk show with me and my co-host, Mr. Mike, is the Wardroom Live. Back to the topic at hand. Trade balance, exports versus imports. So I'm not going to get into all the factors that go into GDP, but basically you could watch what happens with core personal consumption expenditures, with business investments. That's basically the stock market and what the stocks do, and basically the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, and NASDAQ, how they plow back, into their own businesses, right? Or just businesses in general, how they plow back their profits into the business or invest in expansion or new projects. So that's business investment. Government spending. So government spending is a tricky one. It's, the government's going to spend money, and we've been spending money at an exorbitant rate for a very long time. The government keeps growing, and there's always programs, and there's always regulation, and there's always federal jobs to be had. And so we basically live in kind of a welfare state, and we're paying for incentives. We prop up the people through incentives. Really, it's not necessarily a free market democracy. It's kind of a quasi democracy with socialistic tendencies already. Anyway, our GDP to debt ratio is an important one. We're at 106 right now. We'd like to keep that obviously under 100, but we've ticked up to 106. So we have more debt that we need to pay off than we're actually producing through tax revenue. Anyway, trade balance is important. This whole tariff situation is born out of trade balance. It's not bad for an economy like the United States. I'm just pulling up the numbers real quick here. To have a trade deficit. We're a consumer-based economy. We don't manufacture a whole lot that we consume. Everything that's plastic and electronics comes from China or Korea or Japan. Automobiles. Also, everything that we buy that's made in China, basically, that we're importing into the United States. So exports minus imports, when that number is negative, we have a trade imbalance and we have a trade deficit. So right now the trade balance is at negative 50 billion for the month of June, 55.2 billion for the month of June, down from 55.3 for May from the previous month, and exports have dropped 2.1%. Imports have imports have also fell. So this probably has a lot to do with the trade disparity with China and the tariff situation. So I talked a lot. This is a lot of information in 10 minutes. Sunday show. Please come for Sunday show. This is going to be about trade wars this week. This is what I'm talking about. I'm going to be talking more about the trade deficit. And it's actually narrowed slightly by 0.3 billion. But the trade, and I just want to see the trade numbers for deficit for China. Politically sensitive goods trade deficit with China narrowed slightly to $30 billion in June from $30.2 billion. So the trade deficit is going down with China at least over those 2 months period. And we also have a pretty large trade deficit with Mexico. They're our second trading partner. With all that being said, I've really given just a very tip of the iceberg here on the Daily Ward, and a lot more information is coming Sunday about trade wars and the tariffs and the economy and how we're starting to hear more about a recession, and then there's this inverted yield curve. What does that mean? What's the Fed going to say? The Federal Reserve Chair is going to have a open press conference on Friday, and they have a meeting tomorrow and Thursday in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, of all places. So all this stuff is very important to judge the economy and where we're going as a society into 2020. Basically, how I see it, trade wars is nothing but a negotiation between two countries to make a bilateral agreement be a win-win situation. So I think I've said enough. If you paid attention this long, you probably made it longer than your economics class in college, but I'm not so sure. So again, come catch us Sunday morning. We're going to be talking a lot about this. We're going to spend time basically breaking this whole thing down and how we can make society better for the future, and what things we can use and what tools do we have here in the United States to make society better, and really challenge your thought constructs on that and drive a conversation and a debate. So there is a Q&A section. If you have a question, please leave it in the comments section of this video. Like and subscribe, hit the bell dingy thing, all the things that you do on YouTube. If you're on Twitch, subscribe also. I'm never going to ask you to do more than that for now, and then once the show gets growing a little bit, we have an actual audience, we'll, ask you to be a part of the community every day, every Sunday. Come and watch, learn some things, and be a part of the movement, which is just challenging conversation and driving solution. Really, that's really kind of what we want to do. If we can spark an interest in your mind on Sunday mornings talk shows to maybe, make a difference in your household, think things differently, make a difference in your community by say, hey, this guy's on this podcast that I listen to or on this show on YouTube said this one thing and I think it's really interesting. I'm going to go do my research. So I'll always say that too. Do your own research, figure this stuff out for yourself. It's important things to know, and don't fall victim to media lies and subconscious programming that they spew out of all their networks across the television spectrum. So this is a live broadcast. We bring factual information, and we like to stay true to the data and what we see and how we see fit. So I'm signing off for now. My name's Peter Ward. This is the Daily Ward, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.